Hello, this is Glynn Tonsor. I'm a faculty member of the Department of Agriculture Economics here at Kansas State University. I'm making this recording on Thursday, April 16th. It's intended to be a brief update from a full webinar I gave a week ago. And at the end of this presentation, I'll show you where the link is to that. I encourage you to see that for more detailed and documented thoughts. Lots of things have happened since last Thursday, while I'm making this recording. One of them was the industry has received this report. The NCBA commissioned a study. It was led by Dr. Darrell Peel at Oklahoma State University. I was one of 9 on it. We were tasked with approximating the damages done to date to the beef cattle sector. We did that, and the total number was $13.6 billion. I'm not going to dive into the details. You guys can do that separately, but this gives us context on the unique and scope of damages that the market has been signaling to the industry. Those effects have happened for a couple of reasons. One is we have demand concerns. Macroeconomic environment is certainly not as strong as it was 100 days ago, pre-COVID, and that is not good for meat demand in general. It's not good for the demand of many goods, and beef demand in particular tends to be sensitive to the macroeconomic environment. Right here is a reminder that past studies I've done with Jason Lusk and Ted Schroeder have actually found that beef demand has become more sensitive to consumer expenditures, which is a proxy for the macro environment here. As employment rates were stronger and consumer sentiment was more positive, that tends to be good for beef demand. However, when the opposite happens, that's not good for beef demand. So that is weighing on the market. Another demand point I'll note here is in February, I had the pleasure to launch a new project. It's called the Meat Demand Monitor. It's a study that is supported by both the pork and the beef checkoff, hosted here at K-State. I'm highlighting it because it gives us some unique insights on retail separate from food service channel, meat and pork demand patterns. And at the time of this recording, we're in the middle of collecting data for April. In about 10 days, we're going to have insights from that. I encourage you to come to the link up here to our website, and hopefully that information is helpful for you. One of the last Outlook talks I gave before the COVID virus became, quote unquote, the big deal, the only deal here in the US, was on February 21st. In that talk, I referenced this February 15th Economist article talking about global supply chain changes. I highlight this because we all need to think about that long-term post-COVID, but we're also living through a version of it here in the short term as we work through the general process of converting cattle into beef products for consumers. That is, in many ways, front and center of the discussion over the last week since my full webinar discussion. On April 4th, Lee Schultz, who's a colleague of mine up at Iowa State University, we collaborated, put out this fact sheet. Here's the links to it, trying to give some context on what we thought might be the fed cattle and market hog price effects of a reduction in the ability to operate our packing facilities. I hope you find that resource helpful. It gives us some context on how and why the market's reacting the way it is, because certainly we have announcements of reduced capacity and operation ability. Here's a list. Please note I put in red. I call it an unofficial running list. It's my best way to summarize the various different announcements. I'm calling it unofficial for a couple of reasons. One is I'm pulling from different media sources, and secondly, different historical data sets I might have. But it's my best attempt right now to summarize where we're at in terms of announcements on reduced operating capacity, specifically announced closures. The first 6 are here in the U.S. Pennsylvania, Colorado, Iowa, and Washington are the states those different facilities operate in. Note the wide geographic spread and impact. Each of those have different things on regional markets for sure. I also included the announcement by Cargill of going to 1 shift instead of 2 in Alberta, not because I want to get in the weeds of that specific one, but as a reminder that we have a North American integrated livestock and meat industry, and anything that changes on one side of a border has an effect on the other. We can't lose sight of that. There's regional specific effects of these announcements that we have to keep in mind. One of the big questions I've been getting is how do these announcements mesh up with the number of cattle we have? Are we working through that? So on and so forth. And I have a couple slides to give us context on that. First, I want to say where are we at actually with how much capacity these announcements represent. And you can see here I've tallied up the first 5, the ones here in the US. It represents a little less than 14,000 head per day of operating capacity that has been taken offline, at least here in the near term, with different dates when we expect it to might come back and so forth. But as of today, that's the total I have in front of me. For the week to date through Thursday the 16th, USDA's initial estimate is total federally inspected slaughter is 376,000 head. That's down 23% from the same week last year through Thursday. That corresponds on average with a 28,000 head per day lower operation. I'm highlighting this because the 28,000 is notably bigger than the 14,000 number that corresponds to the announcements. And that's not surprising to me, but it makes a very important point. The entire sector, the entire slaughter cattle and beef production chain, and the same for other species, by the way, is adjusting to this. Some have made announcements that they're stopping operation, which is what we basically have listed here. Well, almost everybody is putting in things in place to protect the health and well-being of their workforce, to make that a safe environment for them where they're more willing to come work, and to keep the supply chain going the best they can. Those adjustments ultimately have an impact on the ability to operate, and it is slowing down the speed of operation. That is how we get to the 28,000 instead of the roughly 14,000. I live in Kansas. It's important for me to know what's going on in Kansas. But moreover, for the national analyst perspective, we need to recognize that Kansas is home to about 1/4 of our normal capacity to convert fed cattle into beef products. And there's 4 counties I've listed here throughout the state where the bulk of that cattle processing facility is located. You can read the different counties and the different facilities here. It gives us some quick context on status. At this point in time, I'm happy to report I'm not aware of official announcements where any of these facilities have substantially reduced their operations. It should go without saying, I hope we find that we can keep these plants operating because they're essential not just for the state of Kansas, but for the national industry and our supply of beef products to U.S. consumers. Where are we at with fed cattle flow? I like to take information from the cattle on feed reports. They give us current as well as past reports, give us past placement and inventory information to approximate the number of animals around feed February 1st. We're going to get an update to that on April 24th. That should be 424, not 224 on the slide. The punchline of this slide is we can approximate, as of February 1st, how many animals were on feed for over 120 days, which we'd expect to be marketed mainly in March, and how many have been on feed 150 days that we'd expect to be marketed in February. We can see down at the bottom we exceeded both of those. That is, we had larger slaughter runs than those 2 cattle on feed report-based estimates would give us, consistent with anecdotal evidence that we pulled some animals forward. Yes, we have heavy weights around the countryside, but I do think we managed to get quite a few animals through the supply system, say before April 1st, when we kind of lost this flow of information from a cattle on feed report perspective. That's really important because it's gaining us some flexibility, hopefully some wiggle room, so to speak, to navigate these uncharted territories. Last thing I want to note is it's not just the supply chain interchange between the feedlot and the fed cattle sector we need to understand. You have flow of beef products towards the consumer, and you have flow of cattle coming into the feed yards that are impacted. The price signals from everything we've been talking about to those that have feeder cattle today have sent strong signals for those that are comfortable doing so to delay sales. Time will tell if that is a prudent decision or not, but there have been notably depressed feeder cattle prices sending that signal. And we can see, in fact, that for the month of March, we actually only had 675,000 head per this feeder and stocker cattle receipt number from USDA. That's way below both January and February numbers, as well as March numbers in prior years. I'm highlighting this because those sales being delayed is another part of the supply chain kind of working through this. The flows of animals and meat products are being disrupted. I have full faith we will manage our way through that, but in coming months, we're going to observe some challenges on that front. We'll have to watch that going forward. For those of you that are making that decision whether or not to sell your feeder cattle now or in the future, I encourage you to make use of the beefbasis.com resource to gain market-based information, projected prices in the future, as well as this Excel-based tool we have on our Ag Manager website that helps you compare your price risk management options. I'm going to end there. Here's a link to my page on Ag Manager. I intend to continue posting updates like this. You'll find them cross-linked there. And as promised, I've also included a link to the April 10th webinar recording. You can go to that for additional depth, additional resources and links to get more information how I think COVID-19 is impacting really the entire livestock space and some of the big things we need to be thinking about as we come out of COVID, hopefully in coming weeks. With that, I hope you find this recording helpful. I hope the information is useful to you so you can make a more informed decision. We all are going through unique times. I will continue to do my best to get information out to you. In the meantime, stay safe and have a good day.